Afternoon, everybody. I will call the meeting of Board of Investments to order here. And so welcome. First thing I want to make sure everybody knows that there's a video recording of the meeting, so keep that in mind. And then the next thing there, if Savannah is there with us, Savannah, will you do a roll call for us?
Absolutely. Thank you. And good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Jack Prothrow,
Here.
Cindy Youngkin,
Here.
Porter Bennett,
Here.
Tim Kober,
Here.
Maggie Peterson,
Here.
Mark Berry,
Here.
Jeff Meredith,
Here.
Dan Trost.
Here.
All right, all voting members are present, forming a quorum. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So we'll proceed with our meeting. The first thing on the agenda is there any public comment from anybody in the public on the issues within the jurisdiction of Board of Investments? Looking around, I see no hands raised. So there'll be no public comment on the record here. Next thing in the packet for the board members was the approval of the minutes of the board on April 12th meeting. I'll call for a motion to approve those minutes as printed.
I'll make a motion to approve those.
Mark?
I'll second it.
And Maggie second. Is there any additions, corrections, or comments? Hearing none, we'll call for a vote. All those in favor of the approval of the minutes, please state aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, the minutes are approved unanimously. The next thing is our administrative businesses. And so the first thing is audit committee. Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The audit committee met this morning and we had no major decisions on our docket. What we did discuss is on June 8th of this year will be our presentation to the Legislative Audit Committee of our fiscal year 22 financial statements. There were no issues or comments or findings in that audit, so it should be a fairly quick hearing. Also, the Whipley Group has started their SOC audit of the Board of Investments. And we will see some of these later on in our meeting, but the investment policy statements have been reviewed and we'll, as I said, we'll talk about what changes have been made in some of those later on in the meeting. There will be a number of audits from the legislative audit for the fiscal year 23 period. LAD has started their audits of the ARPA funds that were provided to the Board of Investments. They will also have a financial audit and a compliance audit for the period. We also brought up that we issued 53 letters to the trust fund investment pool participants across 18 different agencies. And also the STIP verification letters. I think examples of those are under tab, what is it, 3, I think, in our binders. The staff also did a review of the custodial bank's ratings, required to be reviewed by at least 2 nationally recognized statistical rating organizations, and found that they were within the governance policies. And then we discussed various GASB pronouncements that will be involved in our fiscal year 23 financial statements. Those include GASB 91, which is conduit debt obligations, GASB 94, which is a public-private and public partnerships, GASB 96, subscription-based information technology arrangements, or software arrangements, And then GASB 99, which is an omnibus statement that involves several issues, including financial guarantees, derivative instruments, leases, public-private partnerships, and other items. Another short discussion on GASB statements coming up in the 24-25 period, but they'll be looking at those as they come up. We did have on our docket to review the accounting staff review, but because the HR committee was looking at the full review of the Board of Investments, we deferred that to the HR committee. And with that, that was it.
Thank you, Mark. Complete report. Any questions for Mark on the audit committee? Hearing none. The next report is from the loan committee. Jeff, would you give your report?
Yes, the loan committee met this morning. Multiple items on the agenda. First, we discussed House Bill 819 and a potential implementation plan. The board is working on concepts to develop a plan to effectively deploy those funds, which are targeted towards housing infrastructure and workforce housing. In addition, we reviewed 2 in-state loan requests, one for SK Holdings and one for Nomad Global Communications. Both were reviewed and approved by the loan committee. And finally, we were presented with a denial appeal from Yellowstone Bank and MC Holdings, of which the board took no action, thereby confirming the staff's decision in regards to that denial. And that's it.
Okay, most all board members were there, but is there any questions for Jeff? Seeing none, we have on our agenda here loan committee decisions, but the loan approvals that the loan committee approved are within their area of approval limits, and so the full board doesn't have to do those. So, thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Maggie, if you would talk about Human Resource Committee.
Yes. Thanks to Mark, we ended up dealing with, no, just kidding, Mark. The accounting staff review, Dan went through everything. As we all probably remember, we had 2 vacant accounting positions open. They're currently interviewed and potentially, knock on wood, filling one this week, potentially, maybe next week.
I don't know. Depends on how long these meetings take.
Oh, stop. Anyhow, it's all good news is what I wrote on my notes here because Dan went through and reviewed everybody's positions, how things are going. He talked about the fact that we're working with Eide Bailey and they're building a system mapping our accounts to assist in running the financial statements for us. So that's a positive thing there. He also spoke to the fact that Wifley is assisting in developing desk manuals for all the positions of employees, staff in Board of Investments. He also spoke to, as part of that we hired a fixed analyst position. I know that's part of your thunder, Dan, so I won't give it away. I'll just say that we hired somebody in the fixed asset analyst position, and we hired 1 intern this summer. We tried to hire 2, but we're only successful with 1 from Bozeman, of course. Just kidding. So let's see. We still have an investment analyst position vacant and another position to be determined. The next thing we talked about was staffing level reviews, and what Dan did there is went through basically all the positions in Board of Investments, talked about their relationships, how they work together. Basically, I think his crystal ball and where he thought we were going with each of those positions. So that was very interesting and helpful for me personally, even though I've been on this board for a while. And lastly, we talked about our exempt staff compensation review. And we went through Dan's recommendations for our exempt staff, and I guess I need to make a motion because the whole board has to approve, even though we were all there, so we were all part of that discussion. But I would move to approve the exempt staff compensation adjustments as recommended by the executive director and the HR committee.
Okay, moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Additional discussion or questions? If not, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of approving that, say aye. Any opposed, same sign. Hearing none, that motion is approved unanimously.
Mr. Chairman, that's basically it.
Okay, any questions on the Human Resource Committee? Thank you. Next thing is comments from the Pension Board. Maggie, since you're talking, you want to continue?
Oh, gosh, no, just kidding. The Ampera board met on April 13th, and that meeting included several entities adopting contracts with PERS, and I'll talk about that. We had Bitterroot Valley Community College, McCormick School District 15, Rowell Elementary School. They adopted the PERS contracts, and then we had a deferred 457 plan adoption by Flathead Reservation Water Management Board. During that meeting, we also worked on board communications, a policy that we put together for how the board members deal with public questions and stuff. It was interesting, so we approved something there. We also had education on Secure Act 2. I didn't know what Secure Act 2 was until that meeting. And it stands for Setting Every Community Up for Retirement Enhancement. I have a copy if anybody's interested in the slides that they presented to us. Some of the things we dealt with was the required minimum distribution age went from 72 to 73 as of January 1st. Some of these are optional. I would assume we'll probably adopt a lot of them though as a board, Ampera board. That retirement required minimum distribution age will go from 73 to 75 in January 1st of 3033. It seems a long way out there to me, so. 3033, or 2033, excuse me.
110 years.
Even 2033 is a long time for me right now. I'm thinking, good Lord, that's 10 years, who knows where it'll be. They had some other rules associated with the required minimum distribution that they're modifying. They increased the minimum catch-up contribution limits, and they had some language in there with regard to first responders, safety officers, whereby if they have disability benefits and they reach normal retirement age, currently those are taxable because of an IRS ruling that we have. But this says that they won't be taxable, they'll continue to be tax exempt. So I think that was most everything we covered.
Okay. Any questions for Maggie?
Maybe I have one question on that required minimum distribution. Was that dealing with deferred compensation? Is that why it came up at board level, at your board level?
It's all the retirement plans.
Both. If somebody has a lump sum and hasn't taken their
Yeah, if they've left it,
normal distribution.
it's all in for any of the plans, 457, 403Bs, any of those. And I'm happy to give this to anybody if anybody's interested in looking at it. It's really exciting.
Oh, good. And you have a report for us?
Yeah, Teachers Retirement Board met on May 5th, pretty quiet meeting. We approved the budget, and one thing that I like to point out on that, I think statutorily we're allowed to spend up to 1.5% of retirement benefits paid. If you take out some amortization of a computer system or a software system that'll be paid off fully at the end of this year, we're at 0.75, so we're at half of the statutory max for our budget. So we feel like we're in pretty good shape from a spending standpoint there. A little wrap up of all the legislation that might have applied. There was some talk early in the session about starting a potential defined contribution plan for teachers too. I know it didn't go anywhere, but it's out there. And so that's something that may come back again. And then Member Brown went to, what's it called, National Council on Teacher Retirement out in DC. And there was a lot of interesting stuff that she brought back from that, but the one that she was most interested in and had a question to our investment team as to whether we've thought sort of specifically about AI and the implications that might have, both from, a way to maybe leverage that in our investments, and which companies might benefit more, and also maybe looking at the risks of that. So I don't know that you guys have thought about that specifically or not, but if there's any kind of color you can give me, I could take that back to her.
Sure, we'll work on something for you.
So I have a question. Dan, so if you don't spend that 1.5%, does it handled the same way as Ampera's is, where it goes back to the fund?
Yeah, it just
And it
never comes
reduces
out,
the-
never
yeah.
comes out to begin with, yeah, so
Which
we're
is
just,
good
we're
because it helps
spending
with our
half of
unfunded
both.
liability.
Yeah, it's not, I mean, our budget is what it is and our spending is what it is. If it were above that 1.5, we'd have to get a rule changed or something, but it's half, so we have tons of room.
Yeah, Ampera reverts about 3 million, I think last year it was over 3 million, back to the trust, stays in the trust.
Sure,
as you
yeah,
said,
it kind of
so-
stays
Which
there.
is helpful.
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
Any other questions for Dan? Okay, thank you, Dan. Next thing on our agenda, turn it over to Dan Villa for introduction of new staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Willie Gross, our new fixed income analyst, is here. We were able to poach him from the exciting world of actuarial insurance analysis. So rather than me wax eloquent, Willie, why don't you introduce yourself to the board?
I'm Willie. I'm originally from the Milwaukee area. My family moved to Helena when I was in high school, so I ended up graduating from Capital High School. Went to college in Minnesota at the University of St. Thomas. Like Dan said, I majored in actuarial science. Out of college, I got a job at a subsidiary of United Health Group called Optum. So that's where I've been for the past 2 years working as an actuary. Was a mix of remote and in office, so was back and forth between Helena and Minneapolis. For a while, I've known that I wanted to get into investments, and so when I saw this job posting, I applied, and here I am, and happy to be here and excited. And this is my 3rd week, so just happy to be here, and thank you guys.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
No?
Anything else, Dan?
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So I think we finished up tab 1 on our report. We'll go to tab 2, which is the exciting executive director report.
So you have the documents in front of you, budget review, monthly snapshot. We had the most recent monthly snapshot on the table for you when you arrived. Brief write-up on state government customer relationships. You may remember we used to have them in for fried chicken once a year and no one would show. So we kind of did away with the fried chicken lunch and visited with them. I call it budget savings, but I think generally we have a very good relationship with our clients. I think the fixed income team in particular does a very good job of working with them. We've started a new process by reaching out to all of our separately managed accounts on an annual basis, just to touch base. How are things going? Any significant changes in cash flows or needs? Just to touch base, refresh. We've had a lot more success in helping them understand what we do and getting them into perhaps some higher yielding assets over the long term. You may remember we got the Treasurers Fund into some trust fund investments with their large holdings. We were able to do the same with group benefits. So overall, I'm very pleased with the way the staff approach customer service with our compatriots. We are seeing a large increase in STIP participants. I've got another meeting Friday with another local government that would like to join. So there's a lot of local governments looking to get into STIP. I think it's the right phraseology. I think the concern in the banking sector is sort of nudging people toward us as at least in their view, safer alternative. So at least that's the anecdotal evidence. We don't advertise STIP, we don't advertise our loans, it's just, we take you if you want to come, so. On the session, so there's a couple of things that the board will have to act on in the next several months. Senate Bill 294 created the End of Watch Trust. It will be an account at the Department of Justice to pay for health benefits and survivor benefits for any law enforcement death or injury in the line of duty. That's a $10 million account, so we'll be working with DOJ to create that IPS. Revised public safety pensions, $95.6 million was appropriated to the three of the 4 public safety pension systems in House Bill 569. We won't have anything to adopt. We'll just be getting an influx of about $100 million sometime shortly after July, which will go straight to CAP. House Bill 819, which we've discussed, the housing bill, that has implications for the governor's office with the creation of the new community reinvestment organizations. The chief business development officer will be handling that. That will not require an investment policy statement from us. That's just going to be housed within the treasurer's fund. The Board of Housing has an additional $50 million that will go to multifamily housing projects. The interest rate on that, they changed in statute. It's now to be tied to the actual performance of the Cole Trust Fund. So we'll be updating our rate sheet, and because it's in the trust fund, it'll be a monthly update, so that Board of Housing can just go out to the website and see at any given point in time what that rate is and what their blended rate needs to be. And then the 3 provisions of the bill that impact Board of Investments directly: residential loan program, residential security program, and workforce housing for communities with over 100 in census, with populations of less than 15,000 in the county within 30 miles of a facility. So the Clark Fork Fund, for lack of a better term. Our ESG bill by Representative Moore did pass, House Bill 228. There's no impact on our regular operations. We haven't done ESG. We're a maximize return, minimize loss shop, so it won't have any ongoing implications for us. And then we will have revisions to the Cole Trust investment policy statement due to House Bill 321 and a change in flows to facilitate funding of the state conservation districts. So those, I don't know if we want to look at dates now or wait till tomorrow when we're wrapping up to see what sort of end of June looks like for some of those, but maybe wait.
I would wait. I'd like to ask board members though to maybe look at their calendar tonight to be sure dates we can't do or something. And maybe at the end of the meeting tomorrow, we'll tentatively schedule a meeting, probably a Zoom meeting, but
At the end of June, or towards the end of June.
Toward the end of June. And then another item, typically when we have new appointments, the board, John and I go to Portland to visit with RVK. They're your consultant. So we like to afford an opportunity for orientation for you with them, as well as a board training conversation that the chair has participated in. So we go in and we're with you for part of the day, and then John and I leave and you're able to have some time with your consultant independent of staff. So if you want to look at calendars, we can compare notes with Becky and Jim and Paige to facilitate all of you going out there at some point this summer or relatively soon. Probably wait till we get the 9th board member. But that's something we've done in the past. I'd hope the board would want to continue it. But that's probably a 2 day travel, day of meeting type situation. So just something to keep on frontal lobe.
Yeah, if I could say, we really welcome that. It's been, by the response that we've gotten from other board members, a big success. You can be assured we'll put a great deal of effort into it. We'll bring our subject matter experts in, and you'll have complete access to them. We'll consult with you in advance about any particular topics that you are curious about, uncertain about, or think that we should focus on. So it will be your meeting, but we'll put a tremendous amount of effort into it.
And do you have a vague idea with July, August, or what are you looking?
You know, I'll call the lieutenant governor's office and see when we're getting our 9th member. Typically, we did that in the, wasn't it the August timeframe?
Oh.
So
Okay.
probably August-ish. By then, we should have a 9th member. I don't know what that looks like for calendars, but you know, it'll be, we'll schedule it around all of you, so.
Okay. Good. Anything else?
And
Dan?
that's it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any questions for Dan?
Can I, Mr. Chairman, that first, was it Senate Bill 294?
Yep.
Okay, that $10 million was put into a, for health and survivor for,
Law enforcement officers, spouses, beneficiaries, things of that nature. So, law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty, it pays for X number of months of health insurance, COBRA benefits, things of that nature for them.
okay, so it's survivor benefits.
Yes.
But it could cover the health coverage for an injured?
No, they're covered under
So
state
it's all
policy. It's
survivor
just the survivor benefit side, yep.
And just, just because that's my background, so this is over and above the workers' compensation benefits.
Correct.
Was that coordinated at all, and is that discussion, do you know, or?
Not a clue. I did the fiscal note of if you send me X dollars, here's what we can get you on it longer term, and
That's fine.
Yep.
So Dan, I have one question just on the budget. It looks like we're in good shape. We'll end the fiscal year fine. Is there any?
oh yeah.
Any details or anything you need to?
Yes, I did mention earlier, we are going to do another $500,000 dividend payment to the participants on June 1. Our working capital will be brought into the 60-day working capital, at least projected to be. We'll see how expenses come in for the rest of the year, but hopefully we'll get there. We are gonna move from operation, for next fiscal year, move from operations to personal services, because we are so low in operations, but you know, from a budgetary perspective, we're in great shape, very happy, no complaints.
These are really helpful, Dan. I mean, even.
Oh, that reminds me, did want to bring up to speed on the deferred maintenance project that's, will show up in revenue side. Second floor has their new heating exchange and lights going in this week. Being there for 2 weeks, then down to the first floor, then up here, so we'll have 2 weeks we're working from home while they're replacing all of the lights and switching out all of the valves and the HVAC. We were scheduled to do the elevator at Park July 1. It decided it wanted to die May 1st. So we started working on that a little early, but we'll pay it in next fiscal year when we get the invoice, so it doesn't throw the budget off. It was already planned for. This will be our best year ever with rental income. Last year, we were at 2.7 million total. As of April 1, we were at 2.4 million total with a few more months of rent to come in. So we are meeting our capital budget needs, as well as turning over a good IRR. This year will be a little fluky because we were able to sell that California lot. So we'll have that in the books. We also moved our money from FIB, which was paying us, call it 0.7% interest, into STIP. So we now have half of what used to be just the cash flow sort of sitting at our outside account with the property manager. We moved that into STIP, so we'll be getting, 7% T-bill today. So much better than that from a return perspective on the Helena buildings. We're still fully leased, working on, there's one tenant who wants to move out in several years. think we've got someone ready to move into that space so we can stay fully occupied with our 10-year leases and our 3% escalators. So good income.
Good.
And we finally have a capital budget.
Even better. Anything else? Okay, thank you, Dan. Next thing I think we'll go to tab 3, investment policy statement review. John, you've been putting a lot of work into these, it looks like.
Yeah, so.
Be excited about it, will you?
I'm super excited about it. It was such a great project. As I was sitting here thinking about the policy statements a couple months ago, I thought, oh, I don't have much. It's gonna be really easy and there won't be much. So I apologize for the 50 pages of stuff with changes on the backside. But when I started going through it, it's not often that I put all of the policies next to one another. And I realized that there were a lot of inconsistencies in what I guess I would call the boilerplate of most of the policy statements where, you know, the roles and responsibilities for the executive director and CIO and such did not match from policy to policy, which seemed like not a perfect thing. So that's where a lot of the changes come from. The big picture, you know, not a lot of change of substance here that really changes how we're doing anything in the scheme of things for the most part. But maybe I'll start with CAP, and I won't go through every bullet point that I've got in the memo here, but a lot of the stuff that's within CAP, of course, rolls into the other policies. And by all means, jump in and ask me questions whenever you want, of course, as well. So with CAP, of course, updated the actuarial target rate of return to 7.3% as adopted by PERS and TRS. As I mentioned, standardized the roles and responsibilities across all the policy statements. Updated the evaluation of investment managers. So that's a section in there that was created by our prior CIO, which referenced a policy outside of this governance policy that was really only sat with staff. We adopted it in April of 2017. I don't believe we've ever brought it to you. It's relatively generic. All of that didn't really make sense to me, so I thought, well, let's just incorporate that into the policy statement and eliminate this outside policy, because I think everything should be in the policy statement or the governance policy as we have it here. And I guess I would add to that, you know, when we do the deep dives, as Ethan and Rob are going to do next for real assets, you know, we always walk you through, here's how we think about hiring managers and monitoring managers, and you know, we give you all the detail, and certainly can, you know, happy to talk about that offline as well with anybody that wants to know, but that's all available to you. So I don't think we need to, you know, enshrine it a bunch of other places, and as always changing, frankly, as you know, market updates, and we try to get better and more efficient at things. Updated the securities lending language, simply a change within the SEC lending contract that we have with State Street. So in the past, was, I guess maybe you'd say, a simpler format where, you know, kind of how they accepted collateral for domestic or international securities. That market's changed over time. In the new contract, we spell out, you know, a wider variety of collateral that we would accept in a securities lending transaction, and the amount of that they have to post against that collateral could be anywhere between 102 to 115%, and that's again spelled out in the SEC lending contract. So I think it makes more sense to just reference that than.
John, I've always worried about risk, as you know.
Yeah.
So security lending has
Yeah.
some risk by its
Yes.
nature. By any of those changes, at least the way I read them, it maybe decreased the risk to us or made it equal. So did any of that change any of the thing from a risk point of view?
It doesn't, so it doesn't really fundamentally change SEC lending. So short answer is no.
Okay.
Remember that when we do SEC lending, State Street, as our proxy, is handling that for us. We are indemnified. So if somebody comes and borrows a security for us, that person has to put up collateral to ensure that they're going to return that security to us. State Street manages that process, and so if we loan them a treasury, they've got to put up, 102 or 105 or 110%, depending on what kind of collateral they give us. But we're indemnified regardless of whether or not, if that collateral is not enough, State Street needs to make up the difference.
Okay. Thank you.
John, I have a quick question too.
Sure.
So in that evaluation of investment managers, you guys reference an investment manager evaluation policy. Does that not exist anymore then?
It's not a specific policy anymore.
It's not really.
It's not, no. And to be honest, it was this 3-page document that's very generic. Similar to what I'm saying in the investment
Already.
policy statement. We're going to, go and think about their strategy, their performance, their staffing, all of those types of things. I know we've, everybody here maybe hasn't seen it. I think maybe you have in the past. So, we have a much more in-depth process than that, obviously, where we've got our DDQA or our DDQB, that literally hundreds of pages of information that we're getting from somebody before we make a decision.
Just wanted to understand. Thank you.
Proxy voting, updated the language there, just consistent with our implementation of the ISS contract that we did, brought to you in August last year. And then a number of other small changes kind of for consistency's sake or cleanups within CAP and other places. Maybe sticking with CAP for the moment, and then I'll stop for a sec. The only real kind of substantial change here is asking for a change in the range for the infrastructure-related strategies from 0 to 50 to 25 to 75%. You'll remember, some of you, that we adopted the real assets asset class in November of 2020, and infrastructure as a sub-strategy of that asset class. At the time, we had little to no exposure in infrastructure. That's currently about 37% of the real assets portfolio, and we have a number of commitments in the pipeline and opportunities in the pipeline, kind of a growing space. I think it makes sense to move that up a little bit. I don't know if we'll necessarily get above the 50%, but we'll probably be close to that at any rate. That would be in line with what we currently have for the commodity sub-strategy, which is the same 25 to 75. So sort of moving that needle a little bit, given we've been able to implement those strategies, I guess, if you will. So maybe I'll stop there and see if there's any other questions on CAP before I
have one. Proxy voting has somewhat been in the news.
Somewhat.
So do you get pushback or any comments from the public or anywhere else on our policy on proxy voting?
I would say generally no, but we have gotten a couple asked about it or made comments, but
We're still in our first year in the contract with ISS, so as soon as we get through proxy season, we'll be able to sit down and take a look. Initial numbers, we were right in line with sort of market norms, mostly voting with management, except in a few instances. There was, I went through all of the votes. There wasn't anything that was like, we did what? Which made me feel good. I always like not having to ask myself that question. But you do get, what, you need to do this or you need to do that. As I told the legislature and the governor, 0% chance we don't make somebody mad in voting 7,000 times on some particular issue, but if we can sort of keep it down the fairway, fulfilling our fiduciary obligation, maximize returns, minimize losses, it's about the best we can do.
Good.
anything else on CAP before I charge ahead here?
Okay, go ahead.
All right. I'll only call out a few more because a lot of the other bullet points are the same for various policies, but in the trust fund, adding the benchmark for real assets for performance measurement's sake. So we added real assets as an approved asset class for trust fund in May of last year. And this was just an oversight on our part. We should have put the benchmark into the policy at that time, and we didn't. So doing that now, as we have actually started to have a couple of investments in that space within trust fund. Only other two things I would call out within the STIP portfolio, reducing the maximum amount of STIP that can be held in a demand deposit account at a Montana bank from 5% to 3%. To put that into context, given the $8.3 billion or so portfolio for STIP right now, that's just moving the needle from 415 million to 250 million as a max deposit. I don't think we come close even to the 3% limit, but we should nonetheless have a limit. And then similarly, limiting the demand deposit account at the custodial bank to 5%. We didn't have a limit at all for the custodial bank DDA account. I think that we should have a limit there as well. So happy to take questions on anything else. I think the rest of it is a similar story across the other other IPSs.
So on STIP, where's that? I didn't see that number. That's, how did I miss that?
Should be in there.
I saw it.
You saw it. Okay.
Oh, it's on page 3 of 4.
What is the reasoning for reducing it from 5% to 3%?
Don't think we need the capacity there. B, just kind of concentration risk, would rather spread that over, more Montana banks. I think it would be a lot to say that we have 5% in the number of banks there.
I got you. So that's okay. That's it. An individual Montana.
Individual, yes.
For obvious reasons related to Silicon Valley and the others, a lot of private institutions are doing precisely what Joe just said.
Ours are secured.
Yes, fully
Those are always
collateralized deposits. Yes.
I was looking at the policy statement. It's under the guidelines and objectives and guidelines. That's why I couldn't find it. Thanks, Mark.
Anything else for John? Just to keep our meeting going for extra time, we'll do these individually now. No, I think especially when John calling out a couple things that really did change, I think we could do these all as a group. And so I'd call for motion. Mark?
I do have a couple of.
Oh, I should have known, sorry.
In the trust fund investment pool, page 4 of 6 at the top, the strategic asset allocation. When it says the board will formally affirm or revise the asset allocation ranges, at least annually.
Yes.
Okay, so if you revise them, you're gonna come back to this board for approval of those revisions.
Yes.
But it says here, if you affirm them at least annually, you gonna bring those back to the board and say, hey, we need you to vote to affirm these?
So that would be every November, when we do the asset allocation discussion. We would at least, you would affirm
No change.
the ranges,
And we would-
regardless of whether we made a
And
change
we
or
would
not.
vote on it?
Yes.
Okay, all right, that's what I wanted to understand.
Yes.
And then I have a question on the state fund one as well. If I can find that one. And that is on page 2 of that, in the middle. There were the only changes on that. So it says on number 2, E2, asset allocation decisions made by the board must be made in a public meeting. Now, you're saying that's a public meeting of the board, of this board. Because if it's a public meeting, it could be any public, it could be a public meeting of the MSF board. You know, and I'm only bring that up because, we've had.
No, because you can't
They don't.
You can't take action at their meetings,
Okay,
and they can't adopt an asset allocation range. So it would be,
so it would be a public meeting of this board.
right.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Mr. Chairman.
So thank you, Mark. I'm glad you read it in detail. Maggie, you got,
I'll give them to John after this meeting.
okay. I don't want John to skate
Hey, they
easily.
did pretty good. I only have one that I circled.
Pretty good.
Certainly is.
Yeah, a lot of pressure.
I should thank Savannah and Peggy Mack for helping me with all of the painful word formatting and all that good stuff that goes along with making changes to this stuff.
There's a few formatting things where they'll have to bring things up, but I
There
figure
are.
those
yeah,
are minor, right?
And we're aware.
Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the investment policy statements we just
I'll
discussed.
move the investment policy statement.
Second,
Second.
second by Cindy. Any other questions, comments, discussion? Okay, I'm glad you're looking at it every time, John. So with that, all those in favor of the new statement, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Hearing none, they're approved unanimously. And so we could have a break now, but I think what we'll do is start on the real asset class review. And then when we get tired, we can take a break.
Okay, I will wander down and
Wander down, you can stretch for a minute or get some coffee or something and trade.
why don't we do 5-minute break while we do?
5 minutes then.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the board. The next thing that we're gonna talk about is on tab 4, real asset class review. And Ethan and Rob are gonna do that for us. John, do you have any introductory comments or turn it over to Ethan?
These guys are great. I'll turn it over to them.
Okay, it's all yours. Wow, thank you, John.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
A lot of pressure now.
We're on tab 4, and I'm gonna flip right to page 2 and bring you to a visual representation of our overall strategic asset allocation, within which our allocation of real assets is broken out. It's a nice visual. I like pictures. It's a small piece, but nevertheless a very important piece of our overall asset allocation. And here you have it. Moving on to page 3, you'll see our net asset value broken up, our dollar value add over the 1, 5, and 10-year periods in our returns. They're pretty straightforward and speak for themselves. Happy to address any questions. And by all means, please stop me along the way. Definitely interrupt. This is your time. I tend to run long in the tooth and explain a lot, but I promise I won't this time, as I've been told not to. So I'll be cranking right along.
So Ethan, maybe just generally, and John and I talked about this, and for ops on the television too. When we do these performance in the new system, we need to make sure we include fiscal year to date on all of them throughout. 1 year's good, but Maggie and Dan don't care about the 1 year, they care about the fiscal year. So just not to interrupt your groove,
No
but
problem. That's all well and good. Thanks for the heads up. Will do. I'll coordinate with Matt and company and we'll get on that. Great. Thanks. So turning to page 4, we address here in the next, this slide, sort of the role allocation and the constraints. As a reminder, I mean, this is the purpose here for the real assets is to be a diversifier, take advantage of opportunities while achieving the highest possible return. We seek to diversify by vintage year, geography, strategies, and seek out long-term capital gains with income. So it's, not necessarily a balanced approach, but certainly dual goal objectives there. As a reminder for many of you, the strategy was incepted back on April 1st of 2017. So just over 5 years. And we have a blended benchmark That is a third between the commodity, ACWI Commodity Producers Index, the Infrastructure Index, and TIPS. Yes, sir.
Just looking at the performance difference between us and the benchmark, it makes me wonder if that's the right benchmark.
Well, that's a great question, and that is a lengthy conversation, but I'm happy to make a few comments. So I will just maybe say it's a public market index and is not going to be a sort of benchmark. It's not going to be a perfect match. Private market benchmarks are essentially impossible to create, mirror, et cetera. And in full transparency, I believe that our only benchmark is beating our actuarial rate of return. And so if I can seek out strategies that are going to be accretive to that actuarial rate of return through time, that's the only thing I care about, because that means that we can pay benefits in perpetuity, and that is our primary mission here. But I believe in November we talked benchmarks, and maybe I'll defer to John to see if he has any comments. But was that helpful at all? Okay, great, thanks, Dan. I don't want to avoid the question by any means, but just some thoughts.
I mean, this asset class is probably the most difficult one, because there's not even consensus in the industry as to what, the real assets asset class should contain, let alone a real assets benchmark of the sort that I've ever really seen. So admittedly, there's a mismatch here, as you say, but we don't really have a better alternative at this point. And I think Ethan's spot on that at the end of the day, across the board, we're less concerned about beating a particular benchmark than we are meeting our actuarial hurdle. And, it's probably a benchmark here that's less informative than, of course, say domestic equities or something. You can get a better feel for the relative performance, but when we come up with a better solution, we'll certainly bring it forward.
Yeah, this board is familiar with private benchmarks, or public benchmarks that don't match well with private investments. So we've had that discussion many times. And John is exactly right. We have dozens of clients that have real asset buckets in their asset allocation. I guarantee you no two of them are the same. No two of them are not only the same in terms of the weightings, no two of them are the same necessarily in terms of what's in them at all. And so peer analysis is almost impossible. I will say with respect to Ethan, that his aspirational benchmark is a very high benchmark indeed. To have this asset class consistently breach the actuarial rate of return, that's a big ask.
Yeah.
But Ethan has never pulled back from a challenge for sure. The one advantage that this benchmark has for all of its weaknesses is that it does reflect aspects of the investment universe that your staff might utilize or utilize derivatives of. And I don't mean that in the financial derivative sense. I mean related areas that that they might use inside the asset class. But that's not a strong statement for it. So I'll stop there.
Challenge accepted, Jim.
I knew you would.
Any other questions? Fantastic. We'll move to page 5. Just as a reminder, the approved range for real assets is 2 to 8%. We're at a little above 6 currently. No more than 2% in any single position. No more than 30% outside the US. No more than 10% in co-investments. And then down below, you have our strategic constraints listed out there, which as of not too long ago are already out of sync, given the recently approved increase in the range with infrastructure moving from 0 to 50 to 25 to 75. Thank you for that, by the way. I think it was a great recommendation. And then leverage within timber, 0 to 30%. We're sitting at approximately 6.5, so well within that policy constraint. Any questions? Okay, so we'll move to the next page. And relative to those strategic constraints, I've got another picture for you. And you can see that we are within the constraints, and just another way to visualize and think about our strategic asset allocation within real assets. Happy to answer any questions. Seeing none, we'll keep on cranking. So on the next page, in case you were wondering or just curious, I've just listed out some examples of possible investment opportunities within each one of these strategic objectives within the real assets asset class. Pretty diversified set of investment opportunities, certainly not all encompassing. Inflation-linked bonds, that's pretty plain vanilla. There's not a whole lot of opportunity there other than in inflation-linked bonds. But certainly within infrastructure, there are myriad opportunities as in commodities.
The water right, do you have investments in water rights now? How does that work?
We do not. So I can give you an example, one of which I killed recently because the manager wanted to go ahead and acquire senior water rights, which at the surface sounds interesting given demands on water supply and the fact that we are in a major drought in the Southwest, and he wanted to go ahead and start fallowing land and then selling into the municipality with the supply and demand sort of imbalance. And it didn't seem right given food needs, given we were in a massive drought in the Southwest. The strategy was focused in the Southwest, and water's drying up actively, the aquifer is being drained. And so essentially you buy water rights, and then instead of selling them to the farmer to grow food, you sell them to the municipality, which plays the supply demand game, and you charge higher rates for the water.
So you would do that just through a private equity or something like that?
That's precisely correct. Yes, that's one way to think about it. There's other ways to think about buying municipal waste systems and operating them and creating efficiencies, maybe generating more clean water than less and having more volume to sell. And that's another strategy, for example. Haven't gone there yet, still pretty niche, but it's part of the opportunity set, so I wanted to avail you of that.
Ethan's right. It's a very sensitive area in the Southwest. In fact, California's legislature is currently debating a bill that would bar certain types of financial investors from owning water rights, specifically hedge funds in that case. Now, that's all I know about it, but that's all I need to know that it's a controversial area.
So Ethan, is there any particular group of investments that you're really looking at right now, forward-looking?
Yes, there's a number of them. Where to begin? So Rob and I are spending time currently, basically maybe phase 2 of our diligence process, looking at a data center owner and operator. Recall that we approved a separate account that was focused on digital infrastructure not too long ago, and they have since made a couple of data center investments. However, it's more of a private equity type investment within the platform itself. And within each platform, there's it's an operating business. So they're doing development and owning and operating and leasing the projects versus this strategy that we're looking at. There's a pre-specified pool, of 12 or maybe 16 data centers that have already been developed all over the globe that they own and operate and have leased up to credit tenants with 10 to 20 year triple net leases with the likes of, the major, digital platforms, social platforms in the world. And so that we're spending some time there. I think there's room in the portfolio and for that. It's a nice complement to the sort of growthier private equity play. This is more of a digital infrastructure, current income, collect lease payments. What else are we doing, Rob? I'm spending a lot of time thinking about oil and gas. We will be talking to you tomorrow about an opportunity we just re-upped with one of our current managers. This is our third investment with them. They're a vertically integrated oil and gas developer, producer, et cetera. There's been a ton of capital flight from the space. Part of that is associated with this paradigm shift in the industry from growth at all costs to, hey, let's reduce our CapEx budgets, let's focus on dividend payments, debt repayment, let's get our balance sheets in order, and sort of this reaction to the energy transition, if you will. And so in spite of what sort of happened through COVID, CapEx budgets haven't really rebounded. Institutional capital is fleeing from the space, but oil and gas is not going away. It's still 70+% of our energy needs. It will, beyond that, I mean, it goes into that plastic flower bucket, those plastic flowers, the crayons that our kids use, the tires on our cars, the streets that we drive on. It's not going away. And long story short, when there's capital flight from the space that has been underinvested for years, that portends opportunity. So massive opportunity, in fact. And in fact, once we get out of this economic blip, because of the underinvestment and the reduction in drilled but uncompleted wells and so on and so forth, there's going to be a massive rebound and lack of supply. And I think I'm super constructive and bullish on oil right now. So, but you know, there's others too. I suppose I could go on and on, but I'll stop.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, appreciate the indulgence. Any other questions on page 7? Okay, seeing none. Sources and drivers. Sources of return, you know, stating the obvious, but appreciation, depreciation, income. On the right side, I've listed a number of drivers of return. You know, I guess I would say in real assets, we're invested in everything from rail cars to timber to oil and gas wells to oil and gas service companies. So I tried to make this drivers column as representative of the drivers of opportunity that of returns that we're exposed to. Happy to answer any particular questions if none of these make sense.
Ethan, this is a long list, and appropriately so, given the breadth of the universe that you invest in. Looking at the last, year, 2, 3 of performance in the asset class, are there several of these drivers that kind of were the drivers during this particular period?
I mean, certainly you could argue EBITDA, multiple expansion on the oil and gas side, certainly commodities, operational improvements are always something that we seek out. Supply and demand was a big part of that for sure in the big run up. Capital markets liquidity, this was all maybe pre kind of 8 to 12 months ago, but there's a crush of capital out in the space right now. There's no secret, and when there's tons of money chasing tons of limited deals, that artificially drives prices up. So that's been a big part of it too, I suppose. But all of these have played into it, just in different proportional rates, I suppose.
So it's not just oil and gas prices going up?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, that's just a fraction of our overall real assets portfolio. Any more questions? Okay. So we'll move on to benefits and risks. We'll address benefits first. I won't read the list for you, but I think this is pretty representative of sort of the things we're thinking about. I'm happy to provide examples of any of these. If there's any specific questions, but I'll leave it to you to fire away.
I don't want you to get away with, an easy presentation.
Thank you. I don't want easy presentations. I want questions, Jack. That's why I'm here.
Hard asset downside protection.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Okay, sure.
High level.
Sure. Trees. Rail cars have a usable life of 50 years before they get scrapped. And so even at scrap, there's scrap value. As an example. How about that?
You said trees, what's?
Trees, we own timber, we own trees. That's hard at, so if prices aren't right, if they're low, if they're artificially low and it's a poor environment to sell your stumpage or your saw logs into, you just leave it there. on the stump and you let it grow. And through that biological growth, literally the tree getting bigger, that creates more value. There's more board feet that when that tree is ultimately harvested, there's more volume you can sell into the market at a higher price when the price is right. No pun intended. My favorite show, by the way. All right. Moving on to page 10. I've listed a number of risks. I guess I would just highlight here that these aren't solely germane to the real assets asset class. This sort of exists across asset classes, be it private equity or real estate, but you know, it's fairly representative of what we think about, and you know, some are pretty much, most are more or less out of our control. We do outsource most of our capital and put these risks largely in the hands of those that manage the capital on our behalf. But we spend a lot of time talking to managers about these risks and how they themselves work to address these particular issues and how they've been successful or not. Happy to address any questions.
So this is, risk is my favorite topic.
I know, I love that.
So from a board level, you were giving us advice, make sure we've covered a lot of these risks you've itemized through our policies or constraints or things like that. Is there anything that you could say to the board here that that we should do in our policies or procedures to help us understand or mitigate risk when we can?
So the board policies and procedures, that's an interesting question. I don't know that I would point to anything specific, Jack, other than, you know, it all boils down to process. And when I talk to Rob, for example, and trying to just help Rob understand what we do, and, you know, that actually leads me to, I'm gonna add something to this list. Our biggest risk is people. Because we're allocating capital to people to manage on our behalf, we spend a lot of time with people. That's why we get their decks first, and we read the decks to make sure there's a portfolio fit. If there's a portfolio fit and we like it, then we spend time on the phone with them to gauge, frankly, our spidey sense and what we think of those people and how they present their strategy and how that fits with us. And then we bring them to Montana and we actually meet with them in person, and I shake their hands and I look them in the eye and we ask them tough questions and we sit across the table from them. John meets with them, Rob and I, the whole team meets with them. We debrief. We talk about culture. We inundate them subsequent to that with a bunch of questions and questionnaires and data templates, and we do references to assess the people and their professional acumen and corroborate their stories. We do background checks to make sure they're not criminals and they haven't, you know, they don't have regulatory, you know, flags in their background. And then Rob and I, and sometimes John even, we go to their headquarters and we essentially, to the extent we can, we sit down with their entire staff and assess the people. I mean, my approach is not to really dig in at that point with process and procedure and strategy and investment track record. We've already done that and gotten comfortable with that. That's why the next step is to basically sit down and talk with these people and figure out who they are as people, as moms and dads and business partners, as colleagues, make sure they're all speaking the same language. And so I don't know if that all relates to a change in the board's policies and procedures or something that needs to be newly implemented. But I would tell you that our process stands up to anybody's process in the business. And we frequently get feedback from the people that we're doing our underwriting or diligence on that is, wow, you guys dove deeper than anyone has ever dove in any process I've ever been involved in. You've never, you know, you've asked a number of questions that have never been asked. And if we ask those questions and we don't get a satisfactory answer, we run for the hills. I mean, it's just business. That is a bad sign right there. Rob's got a call tomorrow with somebody we're underwriting about references. They didn't provide us with references that we think they probably should have, and we're not sure why. So we're following up, and if there's any pushback on supplying those references, we're out. That's just a non-starter. So, process isn't part of a procedure necessarily that the board has adopted, but our investment process has been working and is very disciplined. It's very pragmatic. It allows for the investigation of myriad nuances that manifest themselves throughout a diligence process. And it empowers the people that run that process to end that process in a blink of an eye for the littlest thing. Because we can't get it wrong. Now, we will get it wrong because we live in the world of investments. And with that, you live in ambiguity and lack of certitude, and you can never bat 1,000. But I'd say 9 times out of 10, if you get the people part of it right, assuming all else being equal in that mosaic of the whole process, it will work out. And you should never be afraid to kill a deal, no matter what, for the littlest thing. I don't know if that answers your question, but hopefully it gave you some comfort.
And we will also cover the process step by step later on.
Hopefully it gave you some comfort that we really think about risk. And these are long-term relationships, years. We're committing hundreds of millions of dollars. Like, I take that very seriously. My money's in it. That's like the last part of the decision tree. Am I comfortable putting my own money in this? So,
Jack, to maybe follow up, as Becky and Jim and Paige will tell all of the board members, when we did our illiquidity analysis a few years ago, the biggest risk the board had was not running out of liquidity to pay benefits, it was manager selection. That if we had a couple of managers go upside down or some downside within our selection process, that's what blows us up. That's where we really get damaged. 20% downturn in the public markets, hopefully the public markets come back. But with an illiquid private investment, real asset investment, real estate investment, that's our risk on place, which is, reflected in the returns, right? This is where we get our return. So the people part of my job, the people and process part of my job, constituents, agenda, people, process. We've got to have the travel budget to make sure that we diligence these. We've got to have the appropriate allocation, which is why we do the staff review. Do we have enough people underwriting these things, particularly in these buckets? So I'm glad you touched on the people part, because it's probably, at least from what our consultants have told us, one of our biggest risks.
It is true, and years ago, you have a unique private program here in many respects. We call it a DIY. You guys do more in-house than any other fund that we're aware of your size. And you have a substantial size, and that means that most of them outsource this either on a discretionary basis or a quasi-discretionary basis to outside consultants to handle for them. You are unique in that this board has made the investment in people and consistently in people and in the tools like the travel budget, which is important to actually make this work. You have the best DIY private record of performance that I or Becky or Paige have seen. And so what you're doing is working. To answer your question, I would say that when you look at private investments, and it's hardest in this area because as we discussed, the universe is so disparate. But if you looked at venture, for example, and you were to say, how are we doing in venture? Not just what the aggregate performance is, but underneath the performance, what are the risk areas? If you saw a situation in which there were 20 venture capital investments and 2 of them were hits and 18 were blah, That would be a typical venture, that's how you make money in venture capital. That would not disturb you and say, oh, our process is terrible and we're recording too much risk. In other areas, like private equity buyouts, you should expect a much more consistent hit rate. And that's what we call it. We call it the baseball score. In Ethan's area, I think it's undecided as to sort of that balance, but I would suspect that the hit rate notion, in the same way that when you look at active managers in the public space or whether it's fixed income or equity, you'd like to see a high attribution of their success to lots of small victories all across the portfolio. And as this portfolio grows, there might be a time when you go back and say, okay, what are the drivers? What's the underlying characteristic of performance, not just what's the aggregate performance on top. I don't know if you disagree with that.
No, I don't disagree with that at all. Okay, let's move on to 11. And we'll just cover pacing a little bit at a high level. As a reminder, this is an exercise we go through on an annual basis in collaboration with RBK. We basically evaluate sort of the current real assets exposure and a commitment plan relative to the total plan assets. This pacing looks at a number of different factors, including paid-in capital, distributed capital, current valuations, where we are within our range. It allows for tweaking and running various scenarios. It considers the annualized growth of the plan. And, with all those inputs, it spits out some outputs that gives us a range of possibilities based on various assumptions. And we generally decide on sort of a middle of the road conservative approach to pacing, and that has led itself to somewhere between 150 to 250 million bucks in the last handful of years on average. We're on pace to do 200 million this year. It is simply a guide rail. It is a very subjective plan that is subject to many inputs that very rarely ever come to pass in the way that you have put them into the model. And so it's a good exercise to run. It's something to think about. But just because it tells you to commit, for example, 200 million bucks over the course of a year, doesn't mean that you should. You should sometimes underweight that. You should sometimes overweight that. And all that means is you would underweight that dramatically if the opportunity set were not there. If your high conviction managers weren't back in the market, if you didn't see any other compelling opportunities in the market, you should by no means go out and invest just to commit to this pacing number that a model spits out to you. And on the other side of that, if there's great opportunities and valuations seem right, or your managers, you should overcommit and likely not miss out on all the opportunities that the market is presenting to you. So it's a balance. It's something we pay attention to. Happy to address. It's a little bit complicated in our, but happy to address any questions.
So Ethan, you're working with your managers to on this whole pacing discussion. I mean, because you're allocating money to a manager, and they're calling money when they need it. But can you influence that discussion or that decision?
Another question is, do you want to?
Yeah, the answer is no, Mark. We do not sit and have quarterly or monthly calls with our managers to influence how they are drawing down our capital.
Once you commit, you commit.
Once we commit, we commit, and if they find a great deal and they need to close, they're calling the capital. I would tell you, yeah, so we do not work with our managers on pacing.
But if you commit and they're not drawing the capital, are you calling them and saying what's going on?
Absolutely not. And I'll tell you why. Some people who sit in my seat do that, which is confounding to me, and I'll tell you why. The last thing I want to do is call my manager and bark or bark at them about why they're not committing our capital. There's a little bit of faith here, but from my perspective, they're not calling our capital because they're not finding compelling deals. They're sticking to their process, they're sticking to their disciplined approach, and they're either, going after deals and being outbid and maintaining their discipline and not and chasing the deal and, paying up, or they're just not finding opportunities, so they're not calling our capital. And I appreciate that. I do not want them calling our capital just to call capital and place it. I will tell you that there's probably managers out there, they just are in a serial investment mode and will place capital nonstop. They'll come out with a fund every 18 months, 24 months, irrespective of what's going on in the market. They don't use other governance, levers within the limited partner agreements to extend investment periods because there weren't compelling opportunities and they want a little bit more time. I appreciate a manager who maintains discipline and only calls capital when they are investing in high conviction deals on our behalf.
It makes pacing forecasts for the entire asset class a lot more difficult.
Absolutely.
And that's why it's a range. It's not a number. Because these are all expected drawdowns, expected returns of capital, expected growth in the rest of the portfolio, expected new commitments. And so it can be thrown off by the kinds of things that individual managers that you say, but in order to make sure that the manager is doing what you hired them to do, that is use their best judgment for the execution of your capital, the last thing you want to do is put your finger on the scale and push down hard.
So Mark, maybe as an example, probably a year ago, you might remember me talking about we had a lot of flow coming back to us from all of our private managers, whether it was private equity, real estate, real assets. We were getting a lot of capital back, and that was outstripping what was going out the door. And so, as has been typical, you were seeing us underweight in a lot of our illiquid asset classes where we have these types of managers. Now it's reversed because, and this is a bad thing I'm amazed sometimes at peers when you talk to them. I talked to several people at a recent AGM that we had gone to. This was more on the private equity side, but they were like, oh, we've stopped allocating, completely stopped allocating for the year. And we're like, well, this is a great time because they're like, well, we're over allocated to private equity, so we just stopped allocating. It's like, well, everybody's pulling back, so now's kind of the time. They're actually seeing more opportunities, and so now we've seen a lot of our managers picking up. We're getting more capital calls, and so now capital calls are sort of outstripping the money coming back to us, which is a challenge from my perspective of just trying to manage the cash flows. So I'm thinking harder about, what's my cash position need to be so that I can handle some of that. But at the end of the day, Ethan's exactly right. That's a good thing because the whole idea with pacing is to kind of keep going and not miss out on those opportunities or be, investing in a cyclical manner, if you will. We want to be somewhat counter-cyclical to that, or at least, staying in the game when things are good so you don't miss those years where, I think some of these current years, maybe with that pullback, are going to be some of the best investment years for some of these private asset classes because capital's not flowing there as much as it was prior.
One of the things that pacing helps you to do is not, as Ethan said, tells you the number you should invest. It reminds you that there is a reason to be exposed to exposing your capital in every vintage year, because you can never tell which year is going to be the best year for the managers you hire to commit capital. And so these hard stops where we're just not going to allocate anymore, those have always been associated in market history with bad performance. And they happen in two primary reasons. One is that the denominator effect. You get the public markets fall, so the percentage of the portfolio that's illiquid rises. This was the great financial crisis. Some people just were terrified. They hit the brakes so hard, they missed 2 or 3 vintage years that happened to be some of the best vintage years you could imagine for all the reasons that we now know in retrospect. This can also happen if there's a scandal at a fund. associated with private investments. This has happened several times. And they become gun shy and they say, we're just going to shut down this program for a couple of years until we sort of get all these things settled. The problem with that is that it's as John said, you lose the rhythm of exposing your capital to the market. So while, as Ethan said, your number may wax and wane above or below what your pacing study says, it's generally not the case that there's never investment opportunities in a given year. That would be extremely rare. And so that constant exposure to what we call vintage year diversification is a very important part of all private investment programs.
In a previous life, I used to be on the advisory committee for one of the big private equity funds in Denver. And one of the things that bolsters your position here is one year, this was about 2012, we could not find, we had about a $500 million fund. And we were trying to find things to buy. We were very disciplined about a price that we pay because that's how we made our money. And so you can't push a fund like that into buying just because you want to get your money allocated, because it does drive them to make bad decisions. And that's not good.
Yeah.
There's always something to buy, it's what you gotta pay for.
That's right.
Right.
Thank you. Okay. On page 12, I just thought, we'd throw this in here. This is sort of a generic private equity fund, be it, venture capital or buyout or real estate or infrastructure, what have you. But it's sort of, it's kind of representative of your classic J curve. You see this net cash that forms a sort of a flattened J. In the early years, contributions outweigh the latter years with distributions when capital is being drawn for investments, expenses, and management fees, and then ultimately is drawn out and distributions begin to outrun contributions. But it also is representative of sort of what goes into pacing, and the pacing that RVK helps us run considers thousands of these fund J curves, if you will, and how the funds draw down the money and distribute the money and over what time frame, that in conjunction with the valuations and our internal growth rate all sort of comes together to create this pacing range. So I just thought might be helpful to see this visually. Happy to address any specific questions.
Certainly in your private equity program, you have funds that are in every stage that Ethan shows here. And in Ethan's area, there's probably a scarcity of funds that are at the long end of their lifespan. Yeah. Just because it's new.
On the next page, I just show the commitments we've made in real assets over the last 5 years, and I just again highlight that year to date we've committed $50 million. That was to an energy, oil and gas operator, and we're on pace to do $200 million this year. Any questions? If there aren't any questions, then I will turn it over to Rob to take it away on process.
Thanks, Ethan. So we touched on process a little bit, but some of you may still be curious about what goes on behind the curtain before, during, and after an investment decision has been made. As you can see on the slide, there are 5 key tenets to this process, all of which I'll cover over the next few minutes. So moving on to slide 15, I just wanted to zoom out a bit and take a big picture view of this process. I think this slide does a really good job of showing the sheer impact. As you can see, over the past 5.5 years, over 600 deals were actually sourced and reviewed by staff, while only 10 of those actually made it through the entire process and were invested in. I think another really important point here is, as we touched on a little bit earlier, a deal can be killed at any point throughout this entire process, but the vast majority are killed during that initial screening time period. This is when we are first reviewing the potential deal. We're having discussions with the prospective management, as well as having internal discussions here. and, really trying to allocate our time efficiently and identify whether or not a deal fits what we're looking for. Moving on to slide 16, mentioning time, the first stage of this process is the deal sourcing stage. As you can see here, there's three main ways we can do this. The top two being our network of contacts and articles. We make a concerted effort to both stay on top of what's happening in the real assets world and who the players are, as well as trying to expand our network of contacts and who is aware of us and who we are aware of. And then once we've sourced that deal, and it's past that initial screening phase, we then kick it off into the initial review stage. This is when we will, look to assess critical diligence issues early on in the process. Have the folks up to Helena to actually have a conversation with Ethan, myself, and John, and really look to decide if we should continue down the road with the complete diligence process. As Ethan touched on a little bit, the continuation here would entail things like background checks and reference calls, a very comprehensive diligence questionnaire and data analysis of things like the track record, as well as on-site GP visits, which goes back to the travel budget, and we would actually go out to the GP's office and talk to basically their entire staff to get an idea of really how they approach everything from compliance to culture, as well as how they plan to actually add value to the investment that we're looking at. Does anybody have any questions there? All right, moving on to slide 17. Should that entire process go well and we have a great deal of conviction in a deal, we then move on to the cabinet meeting. This is where Ethan and myself sit down with John, Dan, and all the directors here at MBOI and present the prospective deal. Once all pertinent issues are discussed and topics, John and Dan then give the go-ahead on whether or not to move forward with the deal and move into the legal review stage. This stage is really a collaborative process between staff and our external counsel as we look to really make sure that any investment terms or that any investments that we are getting involved with, that the terms and provisions involved therein are acceptable to MBOI. Once that's completed and the dotted line has been signed, we then move on to the fund monitoring stage, during which Ethan and myself will overlook the investment during its entire lifespan. This really boils down to overlooking periodic reports and financials that we receive from the manager, as well as doing as much as possible as we can in person with the manager to get a really good feel as to how they're thinking about the investments, how they're thinking about the environment that they're working in, as well as taking an active role on any advisory committees that may be available. We also do try to actually walk through the assets that we're involved with if it's feasible. A good example there is during our due diligence process and after the investment has been made, we might fly out to, say, a data center and walk through and get an idea about how the operations run and how things work. So I'll pause there before we move on to the final slide, if anybody has any questions.
I know the commitment is a long-term commitment, but say you're in fund monitoring and you find a real problem and it's not addressed, what do you do then?
Depends on what the docs say.
It depends on the problem too. If it's a personnel issue, depending on what level of the organization, whether they're a key person or not, I mean, you can invoke the key person provision and maybe you shut down the fund or the investment period until the key person is either replaced or, collectively decided upon amongst the majority of the LP group, supermajority. It all depends. Everything's a little bit different depending on the docs. I mean, if it's at the asset level, you hope that they have the wherewithal. Maybe it's just a blip and they fix it. And hopefully that would have come up in diligence with other assets that failed over their track record, and maybe there was lessons learned. And if there wasn't a lesson learned, then, woe is, me, that was bad on my part. We screwed up and we failed. And then maybe you think about removing us, or if there's other issues, you think about removing the GP and putting a replacement GP in. You could move to sell the position on the secondary market, which involves a lot of frictional time and energy and cost, in addition to typically a haircut to your net asset value. So you're selling at a discount. Best case scenario, you just don't, they recover, the fund does fine, but you just don't reinvest in the next fund. So there's any number of sort of critical paths you could go down.
I think one thing I'll add to that, Jack, is that during basically all of those, the communication that we have with the manager is going to increase. So we're looking to assess throughout the entire process, no matter what the issue is, we're going to increase our touch there, and look to gain deeper understanding as to what's going on and how we might be able to best approach that.
But I think at bottom, as Ian said, there are costs and difficulties to addressing a problem, of various types of problems at a private investment. And what those problems are and what the LP's rights are in terms of the tools that they have to address them are embedded in the docs. And so there have been times when GPs have been removed, but that has to be for a reason. That's embedded in the docs, and the tool has to be available to the LPs in the docs. There are other ones where key person risk, which Ian alluded to, can trigger certain actions. And that's part of the negotiation process, and that's why you have legal.
I think too, Jack, probably the biggest reason we stay very involved with the managers is to continually understand what they're doing and how their business grows and changes, because over time, that business will evolve. You'll have senior people leave or whatever it may be. And so I think we oftentimes would think in terms, and this might be a little more on the private equity side, Alice's world, but you'll see firms that, we would expect, okay, we're going to get 3 or 4 funds with these guys. And then they sort of get to a point where, I don't know, maybe the senior guys aren't quite as engaged because they've made a lot of money. The fund has gotten really big. And so we sort of get the feel for, okay, this is the time, not necessarily that they're a bad manager or something, but let's move on to the next opportunity, because these guys have kind of gotten away from the core reasons maybe why we hired them, for fun.
And quite likely, they haven't built a succession plan into the.
Oftentimes, that can be a big issue. So, staying close to them and understanding, how that firm is evolving over time is of a ton of value when they come around for that next fund, which happens regularly as we.
And this is Becky. One other thing that we've done, and I think you do as well, is actually look at attribution of deals. If you have someone that's senior that's left, you can actually look back at the prior deals to see whether the remaining team was involved in the success of the firm or whether it was really more top heavy. And that's an important point of due diligence.
Okay, thank you.
So on slide 18 now, the final item, I'll just cover off quickly here is kind of how we're thinking about the real assets portfolio today. So starting at the top, we're always exploring new strategies that we don't yet have exposure to, with the thought being that if we can continue to source deals that are less correlated with the current portfolio and look to provide predictable cash flow for long periods of time, that can be very accretive for the portfolio overall. Secondarily, there has been a lot of internal discussion here about real assets debt strategies. This is mainly because of the inherent downside protection that debt offers, as well as the fact that it's becoming more attractive to be on the lender side of the equation, given what has happened with rates over the past year and a half or so. And then lastly, we're continuing to focus on existing high conviction GPs that we feel as though we have strong relationships with. The idea here is that if a manager is doing well, their strategy continues to have some great tailwinds and they continue to be a great partner to us. We want to lean into that partnership and really grow with them. So that's that. I'll open it up for any questions.
What kind of other strategies, that first bullet item there, what are you looking at or what are you considering?
Basically the entire opportunity set as it starts in the deal sourcing phase. So we will essentially look at really anything. So I think a good example to give you now, Mark, is we're starting to see more and more deals come across the desk for things like domestic maritime shipping. So just looking at those, seeing how they might play out over their fund life, and seeing if it's going to fit into the portfolio. This doesn't necessarily mean that that's what we're going to go ahead and do.
That's just an example.
But that's just an example, correct?
I probably should know the answer to this, but there are soft assets that are considered in this category sometimes, and that would be royalties from music libraries, from movie libraries, patent royalties, copyright sales. Have any GPs come peddling funds in that area, and would those under the right circumstances fit in Montana's real assets? John's smiling over there.
I'm smiling at the part about have they come knocking. Everybody comes knocking.
I think I've probably talked to most royalty managers throughout the course of my career. Interestingly, though, no one's come knocking recently.
I've seen one from Europe that was not very attractive.
That's right, we did. That was not too long ago, in fact. I wouldn't rule it out necessarily, but it's not something we're actively seeking exposure to. Maybe just to add on to that is, while I believe in diversification, just because it's not in the portfolio doesn't mean, at least to me, that it's a portfolio fit. So uber diversification, I don't believe in either, but I'm not actively seeking out stuff just because it's not currently in the portfolio either. I just don't think that makes sense, from a lot of different perspectives, which I would be happy to elaborate on, but maybe in the interest of time won't.
Other questions? Well, thank you. That's good education.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, if anybody has any questions at all, I'm right down the hall. Happy to take anything offline anytime.
One question.
Okay, Paul.
Sorry. In the appendix, you said the asset class started, they were accepted in 2017.
That's right.
And none of these
Yeah.
came prior to that. Can you
Yep.
explain that?
Yeah, sure can. So arguably, you could say we've been in real assets all the way back to some of these. So what happened was way back, I don't know, some number of years ago, we carved out all of the energy investments that had historically been in private equity and timber, which had historically been in real estate, and we can combine them together to create natural resources, and then we renamed it to real assets. That's right. That's right. Great question. Great question.
Other questions? Not?
I think
Okay.
everybody needs a little
Thanks,
break.
everybody.
Thank you, guys.
You want to
You
take
bet.
3, want to go take a break till maybe 10 after, and then get everybody out of here well before 4?
Okay. That's what the plan will be. Call the meeting back to order. So Doug, you're next on our list. You've had some stuff with us before, so hopefully you can do it again.
Yeah, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the commercial and residential loan portfolio review and participation loan programs. had an outstanding balance at the end of March of almost $94 million. 42 loans and a yield of 2.55%. Currently have 6 loan reservations totaling 8.7 million and 1 loan committed at 10.8 million. That got changed today with those 2 loans that got approved. And there are no past due loans. The infrastructure loan program reflected a balance at the end of March of 10.1 million, a little over that. And that's 8 loans and the return is 4.07. We've got 1 reservation, over 2.7 million, and there's no past due loans. The intermediary relending program has a balance of a little over 5.2 million. That's 38 loans at 2%. There's 2 loans committed that total 487,630, and there's nothing past due there. Science and tech portfolio has a balance of a little over 7.7 million. There's 3 loans and the yield is 2.75. Human Facility Finance Authority has a balance of about a little over 11.7 million. That's 16 loans and a yield of 2.61 in the past due loans. And then the Veterans Home Loan Mortgage portfolio as of April 23rd has just about $49 million. It's 278 loans and a yield of 1.85%. There's 2 reservations totaling a little over 540,000 and a projected yield of 4.11. There's 1 loan over 90 days past due, totaling a little over 142,000 or 0.092% of the portfolio is over 90 days past due, so that's not much. And then the multi-family cold trust home program as of April 23rd has a balance a little over 10.5 million. That's 6 loans at 2.33%. There's 2 reservations totaling a little over 3.5 million. None of the loans are past due. Dan talked about this program getting an additional $50 million. So the allotment will go from 15 million to 65 million for multifamily out of the full tax trust fund. The residential loan portfolio has, as of April 23rd, has a balance of 1,449,163. It's 41 loans. The yield is 6.32%. The funds for this are from the retirement plan. It's not the coal tax trust fund, but there's no outstanding reservations. There's 2 loans over 90 days past due totaling 82,140 or 5.66% of the portfolio is over 90 days past due. Both of those loans have FHA guarantees on them.
Doug, what did you say the source of funds were for
The retirement plan.
So Doug, these are pretty low values then for these loans then, right?
Yeah, they're very seasoned loans.
Oh, so
These loans are-
they're paid way down is what.
We haven't made a loan, a residential loan since 2010. And the reason being is the return that we want on the retirement fund is greater than what the rate is for a residential loan.
This would say the average amount is like 35,000 or something.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a seasoned portfolio. The risk is super limited on this one because they've been paying on for so long.
So those overdue, the 90 days past due, are those in foreclosure? Are they likely to get foreclosed at that point? Or?
They're in the foreclosure process. So there happens to be 1 loan in this portfolio that has gone through the foreclosure process and never made it to the sale. Pretty sure it's 15 times.
No.
15?
I lost track at 13, but I think it's been 2 more since then.
So what do they show up and pay it or something?
They bring it current, pay the attorney fees. They've paid a lot of attorney fees. I mean, the loan would probably be paid off if,
Oh my
with
gosh.
the attorney fees
It's
that
a
they.
heck of a way to manage it.
You're against attorney fees, aren't you?
I just, I'm for people that spend their money efficiently. And attorney fees on foreclosures is not an efficient way to spend it. If you're the borrower.
Yeah.
And then the last item is the down payment assistance program as a balance as of May 3rd of a little over 26 million. That's 49 loans that have been funded. And there's 48 loans committed that total a little over 26 million in that program.
And that's both phases.
What's that?
That's both phases.
Yes. So round two is, I think, as far as loans getting committed and funded, we did some good steps there where we made the lenders submit an application within 6 months of the reservation. So we learned from round one that we need to kind of push them along. And so we have way more committed in round two. Hopefully those committed will all be funded. But we'll see. The funding deadline is October 27th for round two.
And one thing, Mark and I spoke last night, if you could get the Coal Trust loan sheet, the percentages that we have, and maybe get that Mark on it, I can imagine everybody sort of being interested. It has the percentage of the Coal Trust that's allocated to each piece. We have a 25% cap on all of it. But if you just send that to me, I'll get that around to everybody so you can see the total portfolio and how it's spread out.
I love this report.
What's that?
I love this report. It's so informative, just so brief and so succinct and informative. I love it.
Doug, the economic environment you're seeing out there, are you getting a lot of activity in certain programs, or what do you see out there from your banking people?
Yeah, not getting many reservations within the last 3 months. But there are lenders who are calling, and it sounds like we will be getting some reservations. I know we're going to be seeing some loan reviews. We've got one probably next month if we have a special meeting. And then for August, pretty sure we're going to have 3 loans to review there. I think overall, the higher interest rates could be impacting the lenders. But there's still activity happening. So borrowers don't like it, but that's kind of the way it is.
Any other questions for Doug?
I do have a quick question. So if they take things at a higher interest rate now, can they refinance with this at a lower rate if the rates go down?
Yeah, so we offer a rate reduction if the borrower pays a fee.
Oh, that's a fee, okay.
Then they can reduce the interest rate on their loan. It hasn't happened for a long time because rates just kept getting lower and lower and lower and lower. But now for the ones that do lock in, down the road, if rates go lower, they may want to look at that.
Anything else? Thanks, Doug. Louise, the best for last.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Member Peterson asked me to go through a little more detail on what you see in that activity summary as to try to make a little sense of it. So I'll give it my best. Right now, you're looking at tab 6, the activity summary for the InterCap loan program. So what you're looking at there, let's start with the very top. The top part of it is the bond series 2022. So that's the one that we had issued in 2022. And we have up to 120 million in that. And that amount is what we have outstanding and sitting with STIP right now. So that 68.7 is what we're using to loan out. Now, if you just kind of look across the direction, across the way there, you see the outstanding of 69.3 million. You see that's a little bit higher, so you're probably wondering, how am I pulling that off? Am I writing a check out of my own account? No. That is that fund balance that we had in the enterprise. So we're actually making a little more money on our fund balance that we had available in our enterprise fund. And so the available drawdown there, that's what we have available on that bond if we need it. The pending commitments, now we used to have to track the pending commitment because if we didn't have the money that we had available on the old bonds, so the cash that was sitting there, if we didn't have that committed and over a certain amount of time, we would have had to pay down bonds. That was the old way. Right now, we're cross-checking the pending commitments right across that column there to the available for drawdown. So that's just letting you know of how much that we can actually draw on that bond versus the commitments that we have out there. So the total committed and total funded, those numbers are from the inception of the program. So since inception, this program has never had a loss. And if we're looking at the columns a little bit farther down the fiscal year, and it says 2022, I apologize, 2023 on that. But we have two columns there, commitments and fundings, that are showing what we're doing this year, where are we at? So why do we care? Within our statutes, we are required to have a projection of what we might do in commitments and fundings for the next fiscal year. So if you look at our annual report, you'll see that enterprise fund area where, and within the narrative, I said 2023 is going to be under 20 million. Well, this is where we're at. We are under 20 million. The activity that we have for April and May, we're almost at 20 million on that commitment side. On the funding side, just the activity April, May, it's about 18.2. And usually there's a little bump of fundings right before fiscal year end. So that will probably come up to the 20 million that I figured would happen. So the comparison on to the right there is just the fiscal year. Where are we at? What have we done over the past 5 fiscal years? And just kind of a little comparison of how things are. And you'll see that this year is going to be a little lighter than usual. And that was anticipated just because of the economy and what's going on out there. So looking down below is the interest rates. So you just have a little bit of history there. And another place that you can look for intercap information is also in the snapshot. We are on page 2, and it's very tiny, tiny small print, but we are down there in the bottom right of page 2 of the snapshot. So were there any questions of the summary? Yes.
So let's look at your commitments on the right for fiscal year 2023. It's under 10 million there, but is that tied to this 12 million over on the commitments under the on the left?
It should be 12. Yep.
So
Should be
these
up
two
to
should
13.
match.
Yep. I'll double check and see why that graph didn't.
Probably just missed a month or something. That it looks like it could have been, yeah.
So the question, Louise,
Yes.
the current rate,
Uh-huh.
do you have any idea how long ago it was when it was at that level, or how many years ago?
It was the same, the economy was experiencing the same thing back in the 80s. So the highest we've ever
Way
been.
back in the 80s?
Yep, the highest we've ever been is 7.95. And that's what really spurred this program on at the time, because intercap was an area where the local governments could go as a pooled financing scenario and get cheaper rates. Yeah, amazing. It is.
I think the 80s was a great decade.
So that's the inception was in the 80s.
Yes, 87 is when the program came about.
I mean, I just have to say it's pretty incredible that you can lend out $700 million over that period of time and not have a single loss.
Yeah, so far so good.
Somebody was a good chairman of the loan.
Since the 80s.
Probably since the
Sounds
80s.
about right.
Lots of experience.
Yeah.
Okay, so were there any other questions on the activity summary? Oh, thank you. All right, so staff approved loans. No, we aren't seeing very many, but in this particular quarter, we had 3 new borrowers. Usually there are repeat borrowers, so the Evergreen Row Fire, they're new. The Ferndale Row Fire, they're new, and also Dawson County. Dawson County's out towards the eastern side of the state, so that's usually a quiet area for counties to be borrowing, but this particular round, we have 3 new borrowers. So were there any questions on the staff approved loans? No, we aren't making loans to the big buildings that can almost fit a B-52. Yeah, I did catch that. Caught my ear. Big, yeah.
So Louise, what do you see in the economic environment with people calling you to borrow or what's going on?
We still are, we do have interest. Right now we have 4 applications. They're in different levels of analysis. We will have another one coming at our next meeting, about 1.3 from Lewistown. They have a project that they're doing there to replace their 9/11 system, I believe is what they're up to. And I think the 4 together, it's about 3 million altogether that we're looking at. So to answer your question, yes, there's interest. It's just not as robust as it used to be, but it is there.
So I think people are just optimistic that the rates are going to drop again once this whole thing passes over.
I think there's too
think
much
it's-
free federal money out there.
Right.
Oh, you think that's what it is?
Yeah. Once that goes away, projects still have to be done.
Exactly.
You know, fire trucks still have to be replaced. All those things still happen. So we will still have farmers.
But it's hard to beat free.
Absolutely. Yeah. Who doesn't want free?
Any other questions for Louise?
I think maybe just quickly, the debt-free Montana bill that passed this session. I think both of you will be getting some money back from DNRC. All of their outstanding debt for the water systems will be repaid.
Yes, they just did that.
Yeah, so, and we'll have a little trickle of money coming in from that.
So wait a second, so any loans they have outstanding, they were repaid as part of this?
Yep.
DNRC.
I guess I missed that.
But you'll notice that we committed to about another 5 million for them. So that's a part of that rotation that they do. They borrow it, they pay it off, they borrow again. So that's DNRC.
Anything else?
Well, there's some exciting things at Helena Regional Airport. June
Have you crashed a plane?
No. No, they actually, the B-17 and a B-25 will be there. That people can go see or fly in.
Is it Miss Montana, one of them?
June 20th to the 23rd. Yeah, Helena Regional.
Is it Miss Montana, one of them though?
I think Miss Montana's gonna be there.
Yeah.
Are you flying them?
You can buy a seat, but it's not cheap.
Probably $250.
Oh, more than that.
Depends on what it is.
If you're in the navigator seat on the B-17, they want $850.
What is it if you're in the back though?
Clear in the back. Oh, I bet they keep you in pattern and then they bring you back down. No big deal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Squirrel.
If you don't have a window seat. Yeah.
All right, so I think we're through our agenda. Do we have anything else we can do, Dan?
You know, not today. I think we've got the reports, the quarterly reports from RVK and John tomorrow. You know, to-do list. I was wrong. We didn't go in August last time. We went in October to RVK. So probably a better time frame for, it's fun to be in Montana in the summer. Fall,
We went in August when we went, didn't we?
But last October was pretty nice.
Yeah.
Till late.
we'll see how the weather is.
I am totally unavailable in September,
Okay.
so October would be fine.
And then we have the IPS meetings, and then PEG has 90%, 95% of an employee profile for corrections and DPHHS put together that if you're interested, you can wander over and we'll take a gander at, but otherwise, nothing for today.
Okay, you want to talk about dinner?
5:30 Mediterranean Grill.
Goats.
Yeah,
Park. Is it park? What is
it's
it?
on Park, yep.
Do you need a number or?
Nope, we just bulked it up.
Okay.
And if we have a few extra seats, well, John can put his feet up.
Set my whiskey bottle on that.
I don't think you can do that there.
No, you're right, you can't, so.
All right.
Okay, well, we'll see you shortly at dinner, hopefully.
Thank you.
Thank you.